Hello everybody, how are you guys doing? This is Rob of Rule of Two Review. Welcome back to the channel, and as you guys know, there are two topics that I just love to talk about on this channel. One of them has to do with Metroid and Metroid Prime 4, and the other has to do with the next-gen Nintendo Switch hardware. If you've been hanging around my channel for the last 2 or so years, you know that talking about next-gen Nintendo hardware, Nintendo Switch 2, next-gen Pro upgrade, all of these topics have been top of mind for me because I find it really interesting. I've had very specific theories and timelines that I've been predicting, not leaking or rumoring, but predicting as a fan, as far as when I think some of these things might happen, in terms of Nintendo potentially going next gen. And it really is one of my favorite topics. I talk about it a lot, not just because, I don't know, I'm trying to like clickbait people, really, because I don't think I've ever truly done that too egregiously, maybe once or twice by accident. But I really just find it to be a fascinating concept, and I think that looking ahead at what any of the major gaming companies are doing at any time is a fun thing to do. It's an okay thing to do. I don't think that it's compromising the integrity of anything happening in the current moment, and it's just part of being a gamer. It's always been part of being a gamer. As somebody who goes back to playing on the NES and Master System and Genesis and Super Nintendo in the 80s and 90s, I know all about that because we'd always been looking forward ever since I was a little kid. And now, here I am, in my 40s, an adult with my own YouTube channel that's small but semi-successful, and still playing games, still a big fan of games, following the industry, got to know a ton of great people through doing YouTube over the past 8.5, almost 9 years. And so, obviously, I, just like you guys watching this, care about thinking about the future at any given time. Just thinking about when Nintendo might release something like a Switch 2 or a next-gen upgrade doesn't mean that I don't care about the awesome games they're releasing right now. And the fact that Splatoon 3 and Xenoblade Chronicles 3 and Bayonetta 3, you know, the 3 threes for this year are all on the way. Breath of the Wild 2 sometime in the future. Of course, Metroid Prime 4, the biggest and most important for me personally. Yeah, I still care about what's going on right now, and that applies to Sony and Microsoft as well, whom I also love, and I own those consoles. But man, isn't it just fun to wonder what's going to happen next, especially for Nintendo, who's my favorite company, and I know for most of you watching, probably your favorite company as well. If you care about your favorite company, it's really cool to think about what's going to happen in the future. So I know I'm kind of beating this point into the ground here in the beginning of this video, but it's just because I've gotten a lot of great support and responses to my conversations about next-gen Switch stuff over the past 2 years, but there's also been a sizable and vocal contingent of folks who just find it annoying or frustrating or even weird to consider Nintendo going next-gen sometime in the near future. So many people think that it's like 15 years away before Nintendo moves on from the current Switch, and I just don't see it that way. I've been laying it out for 2 years as to why. Doesn't mean I'm right, by the way, of course. I don't know that I'm right, but I just don't see it as making a lot of sense. I expect something really exciting in the next year or two. And so, with this long preamble and this very extended intro now over, let's go ahead and jump into why I think Nintendo can't extend the life of the Switch too much longer and why something new is going to be needed pretty soon. A lot of the conversation about the Switch having an extended life comes back to some real and factual quotes that folks have at Nintendo have said in the past. And a lot of people have used this as kind of a response or to combat my theories about the next-gen Switch or the Switch 2 or whatever Nintendo's going to do next, happening like in 2023, next year, which is when I expect something to probably happen. One of the main responses is the fact that Kimishima and other folks at Nintendo years ago said that the Switch has a 10-year plan, okay? It's going to have a 10-year life cycle or whatever they said. And for like 3 years in a row, up until last year, they've kept claiming that the Switch is quote, in the middle of its life cycle. Which, if you say that 3 years in a row, that doesn't make sense, because you can't be in the middle for 3 years in a row, right? And I think it's now been over a year since they last mentioned that quote, and they've even started to drop hints or avoid questions in such a way that really seems to make it seem like they're already acknowledging that, yeah, we're working on the next thing, but they're just coy enough about it so that it's not obviously confirmed yet, right? But those of us who follow gaming and gaming news and even Nintendo, we're pretty smart. I think that we can read between the lines when need be, and so it just seems like they're trying to let us know that, yeah, we're going to announce something official pretty soon, and in the next 2 years or so, you might be playing on a next-gen piece of Nintendo hardware. But if we go back to the 10-year plan, a lot of folks want to think that that means the Switch itself is going to be Nintendo's only hardware and their only home console hardware, because it does double as portable and home console, that it's going to be their only hardware for a full decade, starting in 2017 and then ending in 2027. And every time I bring this point up, I asked you guys to stop for a moment and think about that. It is right now 2022. And because Nintendo did admittedly say this in the past, although I don't think it means exactly what it sounded like, because they said that, some folks think, oh, we're not going to see the next Switch until 2027. So I'll ask you again, stop and really think about that date. That is 5 years from right now. Is it really possible that the 2017 hardware of the Nintendo Switch that already is showing its age big time, as much as I love it, is that really going to last 5 more years? I've said this in the past as well. By the time we reach 2027, do you realize that there's a great chance we might already be getting teases and previews of the PlayStation 6 and whatever Xbox might come after the Series X? So, in theory, that means some folks truly believe that the Switch itself will last as Nintendo's only hardware throughout the entirety of the PS5 and Series X generation. I mean, I just don't see that as possible. So that's one of the biggest reasons. Beyond the outdated hardware, beyond the still strong but slowing sales of the Nintendo Switch, all these games getting moved back, and the fact that we'd be skipping an entire Sony and Microsoft generation, these are reasons why I don't think that that 10-year plan is true. Or, if it is true, I don't think it means quite what some people want to believe it to mean. So what do I mean when I say that? What I'm getting at is that in a world where Nintendo was still manufacturing and even selling Nintendo Switches in 2027, 5 years from now, and if they're even still making and releasing some games that obviously would be releasing on it, the thing is, there is no doubt in my mind that whatever the next-gen step for Nintendo's hardware business is going to have released well before then. What I'm talking about is an overlap in generations and an overlap in hardware, which happens to all three companies. Nintendo, Sony, and Microsoft have done that several times, right? The prior generation's hardware of whatever the three have at the time lasts for a year or two into their next hardware once that releases, right? PS3s and 360s and Wiis were still being sold and supported with games into the life of the Xbox One and the PS4 and the Wii U, right? The Wii U did unfortunately die before the Switch released, but we know why, because of what was happening there, and it just wasn't successful. But with the Wii U as the one exception, Sony, Microsoft, and Nintendo always carry and support their consoles into the life of their follow-up console, which means there's always like a year to maybe 3 or so years of overlap where both are present and being manufactured and sold on the market at the same time, and games are also releasing on those prior consoles. They're still making games for the Xbox One and the PlayStation 4 right now. When the Wii U came out, Nintendo was still making games that were releasing and supporting the Wii at the same time, right? And so, if the Switch is still being manufactured and supported with games in the year of 2027, I just personally believe, as I've said for 2 years now, that Nintendo will still have a different next generation piece of hardware on the market. And as I've said so many times, it could be called Switch 2. It could be called Switch Pro. It could be called Super Switch. It could be called the Nintendo Schmoopity-Doo, right? Whatever the thing is, it's probably going to be way more power capable. It's going to have the power to play games that the current 2017 Switch can't, even if that machine is backwards compatible, which it probably will be and would be very exciting and smart for Nintendo to do. But it's going to also probably be able to play games that might be releasing multi-platform on PS5 and Xbox Series X. And so that machine, regardless of the name, if it gives a jump in power that is considered next generation, powerful enough to play games that the current Switch can't, then we've officially seen Nintendo go into next generation, regardless of their branding of it at that time. And I think that's going to happen next year. And even if it doesn't happen next year, I think it's still going to happen way, way, way before 2027, right? Doesn't that just make so much sense? Because if they don't do that, my personal opinion and guess is that I think it's probably going to hurt them, and I really just don't see the Switch as being capable of supporting itself as Nintendo's only hardware on the market for 10 years until 2027. And that idea has always, I think, been the real anchor to my theory, right? Is that it's all about what Nintendo's front-facing and sole hardware is that's on the market and is supporting their business, right? You know, unless they try to go back to a dual thing where they do a home console and a handheld, like when they had, you know, GameCube and Game Boy Advance, and they had the DS and the 3DS while the Wii and the Wii U were happening. Now they've combined things into the hybrid Switch, and I think that their next hardware is going to continue to be hybrid and continue to be a Switch of some kind. And so we're not going to think about the dual console thing. I think they're going to have the regular Switch 2017 version we all own now, still being supported for a few years, but in the next year or two, they're going to release the next Switch-type hybrid thing. Call it whatever they call it. It's going to be a super big jump in power. It will play exclusive games the current Switch can't. And so we're going to officially have a next-gen piece of Nintendo hardware on the market. And then last-gen 2017 Nintendo Switch hardware on the market, which will include the Switch Lite and the Switch OLED, of course. And that's going to be what it's going to be. And so there's going to be that overlap that I talked about earlier in this video, where Nintendo just is releasing and supporting and hyping their new next generation tech in whatever branding it is, but they're going to still support the current Switch because that thing is still very popular and is selling very well. Now, a lot of people also bring up the chip shortage and the part shortages, and it's hard for Nintendo to think about making a new generation hardware right now. And so that's true, and it's a good point. And maybe that's the reason it just proves my personal timeline of next year wrong. So sure, that might happen. But even if I end up getting proved wrong next year because the part shortage means they couldn't make their new console next year, that still doesn't mean that I don't think they're going to do it well before 2027. If my prediction of next year is wrong, I'll acknowledge it and talk about it at that time, but I still then think at least by 2024 they've got to go next gen. The Switch is great, you guys. It's broken records. It's already one of the best-selling consoles of all time. Maybe it even somehow crosses the mark into the #1 of all time and beats the PlayStation 2. Who knows, man? It's an unstoppable beast, and it's great for what it is. But it's showing its age. The tech does not really hold up to 2022 standards, and that's going to continue to get worse and worse as we move into 23, 24, and 25. And the sales, while still strong, are only showing signs of declining. So when you take that trajectory and go 2 years down the road, the Switch is not going to be able to sustain Nintendo the same way as it is right now. And so if you're a smart, savvy, successful business, you have to plan ahead. You have to think ahead. And if they release the next-gen Switch at the right time, it's not going to cannibalize the market the way some people want to think it is. The people who want to say, Nintendo ain't going next-gen until 2027, those folks, who I personally believe are wrong, I don't think are looking at it properly and are not giving Nintendo the credit they deserve of being a smart company and being able to think ahead and knowing when the right time to go next gen is going to be so that both the Switch and that next gen machine can coexist for a while and see the respective support and success that they'll probably deserve at that time. So kind of just a rambly conversational video today, more so than normal. I mean, I obviously treat my channel and my videos in a conversational manner anyway, right? That's what I use it for. I don't do this full time. You guys know that. This is just a fun passion thing. I just do YouTube on the side because I have thoughts and conversations in my head that I want to have with you guys, and so that's what I use my channel and these videos for. I feel like this one is extra that way, though, because I just had so many more thoughts about this. I wanted to just get out and sort of just use my channel and this microphone in front of my face as a conduit to share these ideas with you about. And obviously, like I said in the beginning, I've been doing this for 2 years anyway, right? I've been talking about Switch 2, next-gen Switch, blah, blah, blah for 2 years. And it's just more conversation and more of the thoughts that have been in my head just kind of coming out in a different package here because it's fun to talk about. It's a weekend. I've got a little bit of free time. I was motivated to just make a video and talk about this stuff. So here you go, man. This is just what I'm thinking about the idea on this random Sunday when I decided to have this conversation with you guys. So now that you've heard my thoughts, I of course want to know what you think. Do you agree? Do you disagree? What do you think Nintendo's plans are with their next-gen stuff? How do you think it's going to fit into the 10-year plan quotes that we've heard about the current Switch? And just Get it out, man. Whatever you think, talk about it below. And with that, this video is a wrap. Thanks, of course, as always, for tuning in, guys. This is Rob of Rule of Two Review, and I'll catch you next time on another video. Bye-bye.